Since the late 1970s, Mark Pauline's infamous organization, Survival Research Laboratories, has been staging alarming and spectacular mechanical presentations in front of live audiences.
Any person that is really working with machines has to be able to understand them on an intuitive level, on a level that is maybe not beyond the rational, but certainly on a different level than the rational. And that's what I've been trying to do here with Survival Research Laboratories. The shows are about creating a world for machines where they can do what they want. The people operating them or going to the shows are really secondary. We're really only there to serve the ends of the machines.
I first became aware of SRL in the very early 1980s when I saw flyers around San Francisco when I visited there and heard rumors of these machine performances. And then I saw some of the early performances, which were quite simple. So it's fascinating to see it grow from a very simple crew and kind of core of people to now to where it's at least during the performance time period, it's a major organization, and some of the technologies involved are incredible.
How far can you sort of play around with the power of these kind of technologies without hurting people? And how much will the audience bear? You know, how much does it take before the fun of it turns into like just panic?
What people really want to see in, high-performance drag racing is a car flipping end over end in a fireball of, pyrotechnic horror. And so Mark Pauline does away with the drag race and gives us just the pyrotechnic moments. It's like a sort of a Z-grade psychotronic film with nothing but exploding heads, which is what everyone is waiting for anyway.
My obsessive fantasy about people's reaction to the shows would be that these machines from these shows are populating their dreams. I'm interested in creating images here that get people in their weakest moments, that like come back to them. Maybe they'll come back to them on their deathbed. I was making military rocket motors about the same power level as a tank rocket, like 800,000-pound thrust motors. And I was handling one. It was really hot. I was handling it roughly and in a fidgety way, and it blew up and almost killed me. Basically, what it did is it blew all the fingers off my hand. Dr. Rosen was one of the team there. He's a nerve specialist from Stanford. He was doing an internship to apply his specialty, neurology, to microsurgery.
One of the things you do when multiple fingers are lost is you transfer toes up to your hand, and those toes become essentially new fingers. Plus, we took some tissue from his back to make him a new palm.
The thing's been working for 15 years. Dr. Rosen, I developed a personal relationship with. He has a very different sort of personality than you'd imagine a lot of doctors to have. He's a pretty strange guy. He basically started out as a sculptor and then got into hand surgery because he decided that was the ultimate form of sculpture.
In some ways, the human body is a little easier than many materials we work with because it heals. And the materials that Mark works with, if he doesn't get it right the first time, it's hard to correct it.
When I look at Mark Pauline's hand, I don't actually see this surgically reconstructed hand with a few toes masquerading as digits that allows him to grasp restaurant menus in a kind of a lobster-like way. Rather, when I look at it, I think that that connects him in really a too-perfect way with a whole history of 20th century technologists, rogue technologists. There's Rotwang, the scientist in Fritz Lang's film Metropolis, who actually helps create the first cyborg, and his hand is covered in a rubber glove that suggests that it was shriveled in some unspeakable experiment. Years and years later, Dr. Strangelove in Stanley Kubrick's movie has inherited Rotwang's glove. He has dared to shake his fist at the heavens and been struck by a thunderbolt in response. There's also a sense that these physical deformities manifest spiritual infirmities.
I really like the new knife attachment.
I can't believe that how the metal holds up. I was positive the blade was going to snap.
Now,
Especially on the big beak machine.
there's a nice slashing too.
Whoa!
The only way that you can relate to a machine doing something which is really extreme like that is to say that it's violent. You know, but I think that in the world of machines, who's to say really what's violent? Machines, you know, when a crane knocks a building down, is it violent? They're into being as extreme as possible. I mean, a real machine, you know, is into just like going all out, flat out, all the time, until it breaks.
Survival Research Lab has this kind of violence about it because it's really a theatrical performance of the truths of American technology itself. They want to show, in fact, that the technology in America is actually eating the dominant cultural icons of the society, literally burning its way like, you know, it's like sort of like acid from a car battery poured right into the cortex, you know, into the brain tissue of the American nervous structure.
I mean, basically, the only kind of technology we can get access to is what artists have always basically gotten, the bottom of the bucket. It sits at the bottom of the bucket now is swimming with all sorts of industrial equipment that only a few years ago was out there producing lots of capital or killing people very efficiently.
Right.
And the fact that it's, you know, just the fact that of its obsolescence leads us to be able to possess it and manipulate it. The air launch originally was intended for use by the U.S. Park Services to fire projectiles into for avalanche control, because normally they use 75 millimeter howitzers for that. And there was something sort of unsavory about people who were parks and recreation people possessing live shells for howitzers. Back in 1991, I decided to actually build it as a single-shot device. After the Gulf War, I built it into a much more complicated teleoperated machine. I just hate the idea of military people being the only ones who have the sublime experience of being able to look at something and then blow it up. I thought it'd be nice if civilians had that ability. There's a set of high-8 viewfinders, and those are connected into two high-resolution black and white CCD cameras. It's got a servo control on it, so when you move your head, the thing points wherever you look. Again, it was inspired by the whole Gulf War thing, the idea of seeing the enemy, you know, like where you look is where you can project your power. And plus, it seemed like a good excuse to have like an arts group own basically a military weapon. because you could put it on a pickup truck and terrorize, you know, federal buildings or whatever if you wanted to. The problem really for the military now is how do you integrate the human will into the extremely powerful kinds of technologies that they have in warplanes or weapon systems. What the military has now is so good, it's starting to really seriously outpace human operators. It's socially acceptable to have automated weapon systems come into a city and kill a bunch of people, but it is not totally acceptable to have a bunch of weapons like that just kind of under their own control, autonomous weapons of that kind of power. I mean, imagine nuclear weapons operating, making their own decisions. The human interface is very important. They're trying to figure out how to deal with the dilemma of maintaining some control over them, but also allowing them to achieve their full potential. So in that sense, we're working on a parallel track. Anything you can do that gives the operator that feeling of finesse and sort of comfort and that sort of silky feel to the control is going to make the machine just seem like it's working in a more effortless way. And if you can do that, if you can create a personality that's more effortless and less forced, you know, then you just you have a different personality. You've got a different character on sort of on the machinic stage there.
Most people think of SRL as about violence, and I don't read it like that at all. It's the most peaceful, serene shows that I've ever seen. The technology is doing what technology always does, sort of getting along with each other, doing what it's programmed to do. What I find really violent in the shows is like Mark Pauline, and all the tech boys themselves. And they don't hide it, they in fact flaunt it. They're completely geared up. They have looks of maniacal glee and despair and joy when they're, you know, running the robot controllers.
And there's something of Peter Pan's Lost Boys and the Baader-Meinhof game. Libertarian survivalists, enclaves, dug-in war fans and gun nuts. There's a real sense of male camaraderie that borders on the homoerotic.
Most people's relationships with devices are practical. At SRL, it's so divorced from the sort of expediency of day-to-day life with technology that most people have. That's all you really get here. You know, abstract, impractical, ridiculous kinds of goals that you try to achieve through very level-headed and straightforward activities in building things or designing things or whatever, doing the shows. We were the first people who have really tried to do this kind of thing, and it's a clumsy kind of thing. I mean, it's clumsy even for people with billions of dollars. It's clumsy for the military to mount a battle, even in these times. I mean, there's a lot of screw-ups and friendly fire and all that kind of stuff. One of these days, the machines just really aren't going to need us much anymore. And I look forward to that day because I think I'm prepared for it.